All right, so let's talk about synthesis. You probably watched that documentary and are sitting there thinking, oh my God, I have no idea what's going on. Now, in a normal class, we would probably just sit down and, well, we would. You would spend an hour of class time playing with the what's called a modular synthesizer. And this is what a modular synthesizer sort of looks like, all these little pieces and parts you see here, and we're going to sort of walk through those. Now, the thing I want you to remember is that none of this is really any different than what you would have happen if you were playing a regular instrument. So for example, I have a guitar here. To play a guitar, you need a few steps. The first thing you need, and this is going to sound a little bit crazy, is you need energy. For human beings, where do we get our energy? Our energy is quite literally calories. We're measuring calories when we talk about energy. Calorie is a measurement of energy. So the energy I'm going to use to pluck a string. Now this is an electric guitar, but you can still hear the string vibrating. So the next thing we need something that the energy is transferred to. It's going to be transferred to a string. And what does a string do? A string oscillates. So we're going to need energy. In this case, it's going to be in the form of a battery. We also are going to need an oscillator. And an oscillator, let me see if I can find an oscillator here. I've got a dozen oscillators. So this is what's going to be considered an oscillator. We'll plug it all up in a minute and I'll show you how it works. But you're going to need, in any kind of instrument, you're going to need energy, an oscillator, and you're going to need an amplifier. Now this is an electric guitar, typically we plug it in. But on an acoustic guitar, you have an amplifier as well. The amplifier is just the soundboard. It's what's creating the volume of the sound. So let's take away the guitar and get it out of the way. So, using those same principles, here we go. We're going to need energy. So we have power here. Make sure power's turned on. A little red light has come on. Get these a little bit out of the way. All right, so we have energy, we have an oscillator. All right, so why don't we hear any sound? What's the one other thing we need? We're going to need an amplifier of some kind. So in this case, it's just a little tiny amplifier like this. And I apologize for focusing going in and out. Connect it together. Great. That's not interesting. Just having one oscillator just sounds like that. There's not a lot you can do. We can tune the oscillator. We can make it sound more obnoxious, but really it's going to sound like a science fiction movie if we don't do something else with it. So how do we typically tune an oscillator? How do we make an oscillator start to sound musical? Well, we can use what is quite literally a tiny little keyboard. So we're going to use that tiny little keyboard to trigger the oscillator. Make sure it's in the right mode. And make it so it's... That's pretty low pitched. Maybe a little higher pitched even. Ooh, too high. See if we can squeeze out a song. None of these are sounding great. I suspect our battery may be going dead, so let's swap out a battery and see if we got anything better. Not that much more interesting. All right, so the problem we run into pretty quickly is this is boring. So let's try to figure out another way that we can trigger those same sounds. What we can also do is we can also use what's called a sequencer. And a sequencer, just like its name, its entire reason for being is just to trigger notes on its own.
If you listen to any EDM, if you listen to any pop music, you're dealing with sequencers all the time. Let's make it go a little slower. Alright, so now we can actually trigger each one of those notes into different arrangements. But sound is not just how you trigger it and the oscillator. We also have the ability to start adding in what called filters. Filter, and we'll talk about these in the videos as well too. Filters alter the sound by emphasizing frequencies, cutting out frequencies. And if you have taken recording 1, if you've taken most of the recording classes, you know that a filter is really just a type of equalization too. So let's try it again. This may go slower. We got one problem. Filter wants to go. And that's one of the fun things about working with these that you guys hopefully will get to do as well too. We want the filter to go after. And now we're starting to get something that sounds Alright, I'm starting to dig that. And that may be crazy of me, maybe completely insane. But you start to see, you can start getting some really cool results by using this. So, what can we also add in here? Let's add a delay into the filtered part. A delay takes a signal and actually delays it and then bounces it back. If you're a guitar player, you know what a delay pedal does all the time. So let's see what happens. Now, all this is sort of fun and sort of cool, except for the fact that one oscillator doesn't really do us a lot of good. In the musical world, one oscillator just sort of sounds simplistic. It doesn't sound like it's going to be great. So, what we can also do, and there's some other filters and things we'll talk about in here as well too, we can also start stacking oscillators together. Because if one oscillator is good, 2 and 3 oscillators are even better. Now we got one problem when we're doing this. We have to figure out a way to blend the signal of the oscillators. So, if you're a live sound person, what do we use to blend signals together? A mixer. This is probably the world's smallest 2-channel mixer. So, I am going to take, how do I want to do this? Well, here's what first thing I'm going to do. I got my oscillator here, but I'm also going to put an oscillator over here. Because you can see, I don't just have to have one oscillator. I can have 2 oscillators. Well, how does it sound? Well, I don't know yet, because the first thing I have to do with an oscillator is I have to mix them together so that I have the 2 signals going into the same amplifier. Do that. Turn up my volume of my 2 oscillators. Turn it on. Let's see what happens. Alright, so now you can hear this really high-pitched oscillator right here is generating a certain signal. Now we're starting to get some stuff happening. Alright, so with this oscillator, I can also start putting in other parts on that well too. Right now we're just hearing this oscillator because I've disconnected this other one. But let's trigger an envelope on the second oscillator. So it's going to sound like this. So now, it's not doing anything for me. So what happens if I flip those around? And this is the fun part about modular synthesizers. Real fast, what's called a real fast attack, real slow delay. All right, now I'm going to start blending that first one back in again. Now, this is going to sound a little bit crazy, but I also have what's called a random noise generator. And surprisingly, noise is one of the most important parts that we have in synthesis. Because if you think about a snare drum, if you think about certain kinds of drums, it starts to give you that idea that noise is an important aspect of what we're doing musically. Let's see what happens. Let's only do... There we go, that second one. But I don't really love the location it's in, so I'm going to flip it around. All right, now we're starting to get something cool. I want this to be more of a bass line, so I'm going to sort of start triggering that at a lower pitch. Since that's sort of start to sound like a little drum part, let's also find our delay again. We have another delay right here. We're going to plug the delay into our little drum part right here. All right, that's this chain right here. Turn them both down. All right, bring back in the other one. Add a filter into this other chain right here. And you know what? Just for kicks and giggles, let's do have another delay. I don't have another delay, so I'm going to pull this delay out of here. I'm going to add another filter in here. Oh, just too much. But what I can do, I'm going to delay the whole signal by putting another delay in here. Let's see what happens now. Oh, I broke my chain. Oh, my mistake. That is not a delay. That is a filter. With the filter over here. So, in all of this, these are basically Legos of sound creation. When you get a chance to come into class, you're going to be playing with these. But the important thing to remember is that all of this is just modules that are plugged in together. And honest to God, I have no idea what sounds I'm getting from them. All I know is that plugging some modules in one way makes things sound cool, and plugging other modules in other way makes things sound not cool. So as long as you start from that area, then all of this starts to make sense. So let's walk through this one more time. What starts the sound, you have to have power. For this kind of synthesis, power is simply 9 volts, a little power supply. You have to have something to make the sound. You have to have something that oscillates. So this is an oscillator. An oscillator's only job is to create a wave shape. So you have to have something to trigger it. Most of the time I use a sequencer to trigger it because then I can just leave it alone and let it play. You can also alter the sound with filters and with envelopes and delays. So if you're a guitar player, if you watch guitar players trigger pedals, really these are just tiny little pedals for synthesizers. So that's the important part to memorize. So as we progress in the class, we're going to talk about the videos in the class, but as we progress in the class, just know that all of this stuff looks complicated. But when you start breaking it down to its smallest components, it's not complicated at all. Again, if you were in class, we'd be walking through this, but right now, this is what we have. So, hope you guys are doing well. Talk to you soon.